Around the world and across the ages, you're listening to the April 2010 edition of the Cavern Today, a Mist Online Uru Live fan presentation. You can listen to our podcast, past and present, on iTunes or via our website, thecaverntoday.com, where we also have an RSS feed for your convenience. We invite you to give us feedback via our forums or the comments link under every podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Now, on to this month's podcast. This month, we have a new format for you, as TCT Talk will be carrying the podcast. We'll be taking a break from TCT Talk every so often to bring you music by Jeff Wise and a fantastic Mowog Thought. Without further ado, let's get into TCT Talk, your roundtable chatterbox about the goings-on in the Cavern community. This month, we have with us Holly.
Hey.
Janathus.
Hello.
Jeff Wise.
Hello there.
Wing.
What's up?
And me, Sherry. And this month we have a special treat for you. She's listed in the Uru Credits book. She is the author of Communities of Play, Emergent Cultures in Multiplayer Games and Virtual Worlds, published by MIT Press. She's worked behind the scenes with Cyan. She's the ethnographer and resident doc on call for the Meeting Place neighborhood. This month, our special guest is the one and only Dr. Celia Pearce, but you may know her better as Artemesia.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Doc. I'm glad you're here. Hi. So let's talk about the CAVCON meter real fast. Rawa has posted on the forums about how we have the membership numbers, how many people are logging in. What else is on there?
Level definitions telling you the levels 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. 1 being the terrible one where donations are less than the mulligan expenses and the reserve fund is empty. This would be a bad thing.
I think it's been holding steady at 4 for the past few months.
That's
Good.
Awesome.
Which is great. And I'm glad that he listed them correctly, because most people in movies even talks about how most movies get it wrong with the DEFCON numbers being reversed, whereas they think that DEFCON 5 is the worst thing that could happen, but it's actually the other way around.
Yeah.
Where DEFCON 1 is the really bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you guys have not seen the CAVCON meter, it is a reference to the movie War Games. Believe it or not, I think he mentions that several times in the thread, doesn't he?
Strange game.
Well, it's the movie with who's in that? Ali Sheedy and
Matthew Broderick. Matthew Broderick.
Man, that's an old movie. Hard
Yes,
to
it
make a
is.
sequel.
Yeah, they did. It was terrible.
He was like 4 or something when he made that.
Yeah, he was. So what else do we have on the list? So we covered the CAVCON meter. Do we have anything else we want to say on that?
The Cavern Today now has a SHOUTcast.
Woot!
All right, so
Yeah.
if you go to SHOUTcast.com and do a search for the Cavern Today, you'll find our feed. The host of the SHOUTcast is Moose, and he has a dynamic IP, so every so often it's going to change, so you can't really download the .pls file and keep referring back to it. You have to every once in a while refresh at the SHOUTcast site.
And it is a work in progress, so be easy on him. If something goes wrong, please let him know. The guy, he's got fragile feelings. He really does.
But it's it's going to be all the music that we use and are allowed to use through the Cavern Today, which includes the music's by LCC, Jeff Wise. I don't know, a couple of pieces by Mowog, one of which is still a work in progress, and we're intermittently throwing in music from Mist Online. So check it out at shoutcast.com. Look up the Cavern Today.
Right on, man. And now we have a piece from Jeff. Over to you.
Hi, Jeff Wise here from the Cavern Today to introduce my newest composition. It was something I'd hoped to have ready for the last podcast, since it was more pertinent then. But all that aside, I hope you enjoy Welcome Home, Uru.
let's talk about griefing in Uru.
Oh, you missed it, Sherry. You weren't with us. We were having a fun day when we brought in the new folks. We were having this little Skype chat. Everyone was involved. We tried getting you, but you were online but unavailable. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, hey, we've got enough people to do the Garden Age. Let's do the Garden Age. And you would be proud of us how quickly we got it done. We got to go together.
That was the one day I wasn't there.
Yeah, so we decided, hey, we need to do the other Garden Age. Since we're all here, might as well do it. And somebody said, hey, there's a Garden Age in the Guild of Greeters. Let's go to it over there. And so we did. And I don't know if we slighted anybody because we kind of popped in and just made a beeline for the Garden Age. We didn't even say hi. You know how
they're all like, hey, look, it's Mowog.
Yeah,
we just,
but you don't see that unless unless they
private. Ugly when you don't greet the Guild of Greeters.
Well,
oh God.
Well, I don't want to go there, but
the irony.
But
move beyond it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if people don't private you, like they don't send you a private message, your key doesn't pop up when they talk. Mm-hmm. So we didn't even notice it until we were in the other age and needed to talk to each other. So somebody popped over, who shall remain nameless, and started running around and randomly touching claws, the door, and everything, pretty much to screw us up. I can't believe somebody would take the time to do that. I never understand griefing in any shape or form.
Well, from reading the private section of our forums, it made Mowog use the word yutz. What a yutz! I was like, oi, okay.
But but it was a spot of comedy because we were kind of sitting there like, get away from me! Oh my God, stop touching that! And like we're all on the call yelling at this person, like, yeah.
I have a question for you guys. When I was in Uru the last several times, I never once had an experience of griefing. And a couple of weeks ago in the Guild of Greeters, no, it was in the TMP hood actually, somebody came in and was running around and annoying us, and I thought, God, that's really weird. I've never seen that before. Are you noticing more griefing in the new version?
That's interesting.
A little bit, actually. I had never seen griefing before either, even though people have talked about it being around, and it seems like some of the other TCT staffers actually have experienced griefing in the past in past versions, but I had never seen it until, just recently. It's like, wow, griefers in Uru. These people have no time.
From experience much, because by the time I got Complete Chronicles, the original Mist Online was already down. But from what I hear, and it's just sort of speculation on my point, but I think it might be because now it's free, so you can just grab it and go and do whatever instead of actually having to want it to get it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, is maybe because it's free, it's a lot easier for riffraff to get in.
Mm.
Well,
Demolished Shard was invite only, so that might have helped.
Well, I mean, come on, think about it, guys. I mean, Uru has always been a very sheltered community, and I mean sheltered in a very good way. We have always kind of been our own little island, so to speak. Yeah. And what I noticed is that, a lot of us have had to go to different online worlds with the opening, closing action that's been happening. And for me, at least, when you're exposed to, when you've been a very hardcore Urite. I mean, Uru Live was my first online world. We all know this. And when I went beyond that, when I encountered my first griefer in there.com, I sat back going, what is this? Why are these people doing this? Where is this maliciousness coming from? And I can't help but think that maybe that we've had some people bring back those bad habits from from other online worlds, that they can think they can get away with it, and that it's acceptable, which we all know that it is definitely not.
And it's actually to be perfectly, we don't have resings anymore, and so we don't have as much of a recourse anymore. But strictly speaking, it is against the terms of service. But if you look at anything on the internet, I mean, comment sections on articles, anywhere there's something where somebody can have a differing opinion. Yeah. People seem to come out in droves just so they can spew nonsense. Somehow that's going hand in hand with the internet these days.
It also seems to me like there's an age factor. I mean, in virtual worlds that I've been looking at where the age and gender is a little bit different, younger and more male, there tends to be a much higher incidence of griefing. And with Uru's demographic, which is pretty gender balanced and older in age, I think it's less common.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. My first online game was Counter-Strike Source, actually. So I had sort of the inverse experience from Sherry. So I was used to griefing. I didn't even really notice it, but it was an extremely amazing breath of fresh air when I got to Uru for the first time. It was like, why is nobody making fun of anyone else? Why is everyone so helpful? Is there something going on? Should I be worried?
Yeah,
That's
so
how you
I
get
don't know.
experience in Uru. You do nice things for each other. That's how.
Sherry,
It was a new thing for me.
Sherry, did you ever read the baby boomer study that I did?
I have not gotten to yet.
I did a follow-up study of my original Uru research with about almost 300 baby boomers, many of whom were Uru players, but they also came from other game communities. And one of the top three things when I said, what is your favorite activity? Helping other players was in the top three, along with exploring, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Well, I mean, and, some of our first-time listeners, I mean, we joke around here at TCT, but the whole point is that, the Uru community is not built on griefing. It is built on just what Doc just said. It's helping people. It's exploring. It's about, those of us, Mowog talks a lot about story and how the story is built around being helpful and eschewing pride and all those nasty things that we see out in the everyday world that are these 7 deadly sins almost. And, Uru's not about that. I mean, if you expect to grief in Cavern, you're going to get a really cold audience because you're going to get ignored really fast because people just don't have time for it. They want to have that uplifting experience. But, that's just me, though.
It might be because of the emphasis on eschewing pride that Yisha puts on the journeys.
Mm-hmm. And
also because it's not a combat-based game, I think that people that go into games that are heavily combat-oriented will tend also to be more combative, let's say, and that might lend itself to some more griefing behaviors.
Yeah, it's definitely not competitive. It's like, I did more puzzles than you.
Yeah, that was my fear about it when it first came out. I don't want to play Uru Mist Deathmatch. But
this is not Mist Mayhem.
But one point before we move on. When we were looking at the Mist Online Uru Live sustainability problem, we were on the forums trying to talk about recruiting people, and then they were talking about the quality of people that were coming in. The point I wanted to make, I tried to make at the time, and I don't know if anyone really heard it, was that this is kind of the way it is. If you get bigger and more popular, you're going to have a wider diversity of things you're going to experience, which includes this kind of player. There's kind of a mixture, I'm sure like in World of Warcraft, they have no problem banning players who are very disruptive because they have this massive user base, besides it. Whereas like with Mist Online or Live, kind of every player kind of counted.
Most games have no toss reinforcement, though. I mean, you sign these pretty draconian contracts, but in actual fact, there's no moderation of griefing in WoW. I mean, you can just pretty much do whatever you want, and unless you do, you have to get reported, right? Because there's no one there to see you, and most people don't bother because it's too time-consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll definitely go that one. But, that reminds me of something. Morris, we were talking backstage about some things in the hood, and it was really funny because Morris mentioned that the negativity had kind of spilled over into the MOUL forums. You see a lot of people getting negative. I saw this one post from she's fairly well known on the boards, and she was saying, what are we supposed to do now? We've run out of ages, and she's feeling kind of gypped because they're not to user created content yet, and she just had this tirade of negativity going on, and we all know intrinsically, we all know there is no new content coming. They are not ready to push user created content yet. And, they're really starting to get negative with that. And I can't help but think that it's the influence from other online worlds that's doing this. Because, Blizz is constantly pushing updates. It's constantly new content. And people are really spoiled with that over in there. There was constantly new developer content coming out. In Second Life, constantly new content coming out. And
even
now
Valve's
you get
doing
to
it with TF2, yeah.
Yeah, and so now you get into the stagnation. Go ahead, Holly. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's just, as someone who's fairly new to the community, I have to say there is a sense of negativity and bitterness from a lot of the quote-unquote old bees. And it can be a little bit off-putting. I'm really sorry to say that, but that's just the way it seems sometimes. A lot of people have been extremely welcoming, extremely nice, but there's a few in every group, of course.
That's going to come with anything, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of us who have been around a long time, and there are a lot of us who are very, we've been burnt so many times, we've gone back, been kicked out, gone back, been kicked out, and all we wanted was our home world that was up and working. And it's very discouraging sometimes, because what you're seeing is a lot of discouragement, because, we have stuck with this franchise through come hell and high water. I mean, over in there, it was amazing to see how many different, permutations of the different ages. I mean, I saw a 3D modeled quab, for goodness sake. I mean, they wanted to be home. And it is, and it hurts sometimes, because there's not a lot to do in Cavern. They've finished their ages, and we're waiting. And a lot of people have trouble waiting. And I mean, Tom Petty said it, the waiting's the hardest part. And it's, and it's one of those things where they have to remember that, hey, this is in your hands. You've got to get up off of your keister and make something happen.
But in the days of Until Uru, even Damala, there was nothing happening. As far as ages and additional content.
I remember signing a petition that had, I think it was somewhere over 80,000 signatures just to bring Uru Live back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was also during the Shard days with Damala.
Okay, Doc, let's talk about your book, because I'm in your book. I love you. Sorry. It's always great and a lot of fun when you get mentioned somewhere. Okay, but your book is Communities of Play, Emergent Cultures in Multiplayer Games and Virtual Worlds. Where did the inspiration come for that? Where does a book like this come from?
Well, it started initially with, I was very interested in the sorts of behaviors that were happening around multiplayer games that were not anticipated by designers. My background is actually in game design, and what I had noticed was that virtually every massively multiplayer game and virtual world, you would have these kind of group behaviors, and the definition of emergence is essentially large-scale behaviors that are primarily bottom-up. They're not organized by any one element, but rather they happen over time through a bunch of smaller incremental actions. And I had sort of stumbled upon the phenomenon of intergame immigration, and I had originally wanted to study the Mafia in The Sims Online, and when I went into The Sims Online in order to talk to some people there who were part of the Mafia, what I discovered was that everybody was gone. And this was shortly before The Sims Online actually closed or sort of reopened in its new form. And I had been hanging out a bit in there.com, and I had noticed someone wearing a Sims Online refugee t-shirt. And I contacted people from the Sims Online refugee group, which I found through the search engine inside there.com. And they had weekly support group meetings of people who had immigrated from the Sims Online. There were over 800 people in the group at this time, which was around spring of 2004. And when I told them I was interested in this intergame immigration phenomenon, they told me about the Uru community. And so that was kind of what turned me on to that as a specific case of intergame immigration.
Oh, wow. That is a long road to get to us, isn't it?
Well, we are kind of the poster child for migration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're up, no, we're not. We're up, no, we're not.
Well, actually, I didn't know that at the time, of course, because Uru had only closed once at that point. But the other thing that was interesting to me was that, I like to study things that other people aren't studying. I'm pretty much the only academic researcher that did research in there.com, while pretty much all of my peers have been studying Second Life over the last 3 or 4 years.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. But Uru was kind of fascinating to me because it was a small community, but it was a very adamant one, a very devoted fan community. And so I was also interested in, there were a number of other things that the Uru community had brought over to there with it. And specifically this notion that I termed fictive ethnicity, which is that people identified as being from Uru, and they would talk about the homeland, Uru. And so there was a very, very strong affinity with Uru that really didn't exist among the Sims Online players that I met, to be honest. And so that was something that really fascinated me. The only thing I've seen that equates with that are some of the fan cultures that have emerged around things like Star Trek and Star Wars. So, you have people that identify with being Klingons and have Klingon weddings and things like that. So this was another sort of manifestation that people really created this very strong emotional attachment to this virtual place that had been taken away from them.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Now, because I got to see a lot of you, in your field station, and of course your little area, which was built on Channelwood. And thank you, Talos. That was a beautiful rendition of Channelwood. Tell me a little bit. As we went to as TCT1 went live last month. Just not even days after we had posted it, there.com had shut down. Now, with there.com and how Uruites migrated to there, now theirs closed down, Uru's open. In your view, since you study this migration, what's your take on that?
Well, the whole situation with Uru reopening and their closing, 3 weeks later, is just bizarre. I'm sorry, it's just... And the last night we were in there.com, someone made a comment about it, and they said, well, it's a really interesting coincidence. I said, it's not a coincidence, it's a miracle. And I think that there's a couple of interesting things that I observed in the last week of there after the announcement. And one of them was that the Uru members who were in there.com were actually taking the whole thing in stride. There was one evening when I was with June, and she was walking around and telling non-Uru-tharians, it's okay, we'll stay together, we'll find another place, we've been through this before, and we survived. And I thought, this group is so experienced at having this diaspora culture of moving around from place to place, being kicked out of Uru multiple times, and almost being kicked out of there twice. There were the two prior near closures, that there was a lot more of almost a acceptance and sort of a sense of endurance. Like, we've been through this, and I jokingly said it reminded me a little bit of, people from the Jewish diaspora who are like, well, it's a real hassle that we have to move around, but it's just like, oi, we have to move again, and there was just this sense of, I don't know how to explain it, kind of having been through the experience. And then the other thing that struck me was that there was a sense of supporting the other variants, that, having been through this and having survived it, people were like trying to support the people that for whom this was the first time to experience this.
Well, Doc, how did the Tharians take it? I did not log in for it. I was, you know me, you know how very devout I am to Cavern, and that, I was very burnt out with there for multiple reasons. How did the Tharians take it? Were they like us the first time?
I think everybody was in a state of shock, to be honest. And, it was such short notice, and because the prior times that there had almost closed, people had been giving a forewarning and had also gotten together. People had rallied around there to try to prevent it from closing on the previous occasions. There was a much greater amount of transparency by the company, whereas in this case, the statement was made, we're going to close in a week, and that's it. There was no flexibility, there was no option for people to help keep it open, etc. So I think it sort of shocked people. I think they felt blindsided by not being given the opportunity to kind of recapitulate by supporting there. Everybody that I've talked to since then has said they would have gladly paid a subscription fee or additional money to keep the world open. But for whatever reason, Michael Wilson decided, the owner of McKenna, decided that he did not want to leave that door open for the community. And so people were pretty upset, actually. There's some really amazing videos on YouTube that people have been posting, expressing how they felt about their community. And, the Uru community, interestingly enough, while initially rejected by their community at large in 2004 when they first came in, I think there were about 350 to 400 Uruvians who immigrated into there.com. By this time now, the Uru community is had been very well established in there.com, was one of the major landholders of neighborhoods, had in fact helped instigate the whole neighborhood system, which allowed communities to own their own land. And every single member advisory board in the history of there, starting in 2004, had an Uru refugee on it.
That was me and Talos, fall 2005.
Yeah.
That's right, baby. Uru pride.
So
yeah, blame them.
So this immigrant community that was originally shunned and had to move around from place to place because it was taking up too much processing and causing lag, eventually became one of the most influential and important sub-communities within there.com. So they also took that role kind of in the last week of being, we've been here a long time, we've been involved. But I think it's really sad. I mean, people, the last night in particular, one person went off to be in the space that they had built. I think where the differences between Uru and there is that, you guys were sort of discussing earlier how Uru is kind of this fixed moment in time now because there's no new content. The thing about there is that there was built by the time they closed almost entirely by players. If you would walk around or drive around in there, you would see that 99% of the things that you looked at were created by players. And so to me, the thing that I think is most painful for people is losing all the beautiful things that they made and they worked so hard to build and the money they spent in creating that world. So for instance, you mentioned the channel wood build that Talos did for the University of there as our Georgia Tech headquarters. Well, there's a number of those channel wood builds around there.com, and they took a lot of time and effort and money to assemble. So people really feel like their creations have been taken away from them, and I think that's the biggest emotional impact. And then the avatars. I know people have been really attached to their avatars. In following some Uru immigrants around in Second Life who were from there, they're really having a hard time adjusting to, in particular, the avatars, what they look like, how they animate, the controls, and so on. So those are the two big, I think, things that people are really responding emotionally to at this point.
You know what? I forgot an Uru that was on fall 2005, and that was Kitty. I have to mention Kitty and Kaylee, and if I forgot anybody else, I am so sorry. But those are the people who first come to mind from fall 2005. But I mean, June, Stung Thumbs, all those guys. I mean, we were mad addicts. But you know what I think is so funny about the Uru avatar? Sorry, not Uru avatar, but their avatar. Their avatar, in deference to the Uru avatar and the one from Second Life, is that their avatar was very intuitive. When you talked to it, it nodded. If you were talking to it, it would turn and face you, and it was such an intuitive. I mean, you sat with your legs crossed and your toe tapped. I mean, those were wonderful things about that Uru avatar, and it did not walk like it had a stick planted up its rear end.
Well, you're absolutely right, Sherry, and I think that there.com is probably one of the best designs ever in terms of avatar expressiveness, and in fact, just a little inside scoop for the Varians and who are listening to the Cavern Today, that Jeffrey Ventrella, who was the original designer of the avatar system in there, is in the process of actually writing a book about the design of these avatars and how they, what his goals were in terms of creating better expression and social affordances.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually got the Ragdoll. He has a Ragdoll app on his site. I don't know what the name of his website is. I think it's ventrilo.com, I think. But you'd have to Google it. But you can actually download an app where it's a little Ragdoll. And you pick him up and you can toss him around a little bit. And then he'll stand and he'll look at you. And if you get your mouse pointer too close to him, he'll run off. He'll get skittish. But if you're really sweet to him, he'll come walking up. Very, very neat. I mean, I love that app. It's a lot of fun to play with, and I download it every once in a while just to play with it just a little bit. But then I leave it alone for a while. But there was such a unique world in the fact that, just as you said, Doc, it was, you could build things, create things, and you were a part of the world. You were integrated into it by what you created. I mean, look at me in my Shroomy Safari Company shirt. I mean, we had so much Uru clothing, Uru buggies. I mean, Miyandi alone. I mean, that man created such an Uru culture just with everything he made. I mean, the boat on the cover of your book. Mayandi all the way, and it was so based, and you could feel the cavern, the cavern influence so strongly in each piece he made. So I'm going to miss.
You'll be, even though you were not physically there, Sherry, you were very present, because most of the Uruvians that I was with the closing night were wearing your clothes. So.
I saw some of the pictures from the TMP robes, and those robes, I tell you what, those were a labor of love. I loved creating those, and they were really beautiful. And I couldn't have topped that, Doc. I mean, I went through maybe 20, 30 different versions of a new set of robes for the TMP, but nothing. And people called them pajamas. They said they look like pajamas. And I was like, well, love you too. Didn't see you put in the time. But, at the same time, it was very much, those were just a labor of love. And I mean, I worked so hard on those, and I'm so glad to see that people were wearing them the final night. I mean,
yeah.
But
so you were there in spirit.
Good. I'm glad.
Well,
hey, you know what? Hey, I brought haute couture to that world. While everybody was designing for, everyday stuff, I was bringing in clothes you only saw on a runaway. So, and Doc and I have talked at length about this multiple times.
So anyway. Back to kind of your question too about the immigration is one thing that's happening that's kind of interesting is now you have this kind of reverse immigration where originally when the first when Uru reopened in various forms with Until Uru and Mala and Game Tap, the variants pretty much stayed put and just added Uru into their repertoire. Very few people vacated their.com in Second Life to come back to Uru. But what's happening now is you're getting this reverse immigration. So, for instance, I don't know if you guys are aware, but Stunk Thumbs has actually started a University of There hood inside Uru. The University of There being a large campus that Sherry was very heavily active in, where people could take classes in various things, design, etc. And so he wants to create that same kind of culture within Uru through this University of There hood.
I think I saw that in the Nexus ones.
Yeah, they just added it recently, and it's an attempt to take all the work that they did, which was pretty extensive, and I did another study of the University of There, which was, of course, run mostly by Uru people. And they put a lot of effort into that, and I think they want to continue that in some other way.
Well, the whole thing, Doc, you'll go this with me. We worked really hard at the University of There to create a really great academic environment. And what was so funny to me is how Therians rejected it because it was Uru-based, is that most of us who ran it were from Cavern. And I saw a lot of resistance to taking the classes, to going to the campus, because it was Uru run. And I find that incredibly ironic.
I think that was true in the beginning, Sherry, but by the time that I did my study, which was right after you, I guess, retired, right. By that time, I think that had pretty much gone away. Actually, quite a bit of the instructors were not Uru players, and I think players realized also the value of having a place where they could learn those creative content development skills. And there were even people in the University of There study I did who actually learned skills that they later applied to improving their career trajectories, which I thought was pretty interesting.
You know the story of me and Laura. That.
Of course. That was what I was referring to.
Well, let's give a backstory. One of our listeners, Just Think Tink. Hi, Laura. How are you, honey? Just Think Tink had come and taken my class in Photoshop and creating textures for 3D models in there.com. And she had come in, and she has severe ADD. And God love you, Laura. You work so hard, honey. And we would work together. And she took my class twice. And she was a vet at a clinic. And what happened is that she ended up losing her job. But then she went back and she got a job at a graphic design company. Because she had taken all the time to take the classes in Photoshop and everything like that. And she already had a very strong design background. And so she wrote me a letter, and she goes, without you, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And I was like, that is one for the emotional piggy bank. Just drop that penny in, because that's going to hold me. And that was such a wonderful, warming experience. And now Laura is a part of the Uru community. She's on the forums. She's just out there, and much respect to you, Laura. You are a story of triumph, my love. Anyway, but I have a lot of students who had that same experience. But and that is the power of being able to create inside an online world and to take part in a community that will teach, that will share knowledge. Wouldn't you agree, Doc?
Yeah, and this actually goes back to something you guys were talking about earlier, actually, which is the sense that some players are disgruntled. So some Uru players, one of the things that I'm sort of keeping an eye out for is I really think that players who have been empowered to create their own content in other virtual worlds, and especially now that Bear.com is closed, want more creative input, and they want to create ages, and they've already done it. Most of the people who immigrated to there in Second Life have made their own ages through their creating there. So I think that maybe some of that frustration you guys are picking up on the forums is really coming from that. They've been empowered to be creative and to create their own Uru-based content, and now they want to be able to do that in Uru.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree. I definitely agree with that, because once you have that power to create, that passion does not get squashed easily. And, and we just did Dante's Inferno doc in World Lit, and we were talking about pride and wrath and all the 7 deadly sins, and it was so much fun, the 7 levels of hell. And it just struck me as so funny because, we talked about how hope dies hardest and last. And with all the creative souls that are inside Uru right now, they are dying to get out and to contribute. And they are hoping with all their hearts to make the world better than when they found it. So, it's one of those things. Hope dies hardest and last. And I think that's where a little bit of that bitterness is coming from, too, because they've hoped for so long.
Well, I think there's a couple of factors there. I see things like I've seen comments on gaming-related articles where people will talk about, like, well, where's my sequel to this game, or where's my whatever to this game, and at some point the games are like 10 years old, to the point like, any glimmer of hope there was going to be a sequel is long since gone. The difference here is that, like, Cyan has been promising us this ability for a very long time, and they kind of went from, like, a week before they released the new Ur Live that, we're going to release Ur Live, and then boom, it was here, and then okay, we're going to make some progress, and then, boom, the 3DS Max plugin is here. And so, they've kind of set up, in a strange way, a timetable that has us, chomping at the bit. Where's the next bit? Where's the next bit? And that, obviously, that's unrealistic expectations, but that's kind of the path they put us on with this particular release.
Well, I mean, Doc and I talked about this a long time ago, where when you make something really good, Doc, you remember this, when you make something really good, people always want more of it. And that is the whole realm of the game designer, because they see it and they go, oh, I love that. I want more. I want more. I want more. I want more. And they really get this hunger for the content and for what it does. And we've got a starving community.
I think it actually goes both ways too, because in my book I talk about the feedback loop, right? There's a whole section in my book about something I call productive play, which is essentially what we're talking about, which is when people's play activity encompasses creative output. And the virtual world provides a unique kind of feedback loop in that you make stuff, people appreciate your things, and what you find is that if people get positive feedback for the things they make, they want to make more stuff. I mean, it seems obvious, but in fact, that's precisely what happens. And so, Sherry's experience is the perfect example, where she made a couple of things, people really liked them, she made more stuff. Same thing with Majandi. People experiment, they discover that people like what they're making, and they continue to try and improve. And so you have both the demand by the players who are used to having that, and then you also have the creators who have had that feedback loop and really get a lot of rewards out of being appreciated as designers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, most definitely. I mean, when you see that your work hits the sweet spot, you want to do that again, because you want that rush again. That's I did it right. They like it. You get that Sally Field. They like me. They really, really like me. You know, you do. You get that feeling.
Yeah, that's actually absolutely right. And the other thing I think that's really interesting, like if you look at some of the early Uru-inspired and Mist-inspired work that was done in Second Life, the best example being Numbakula. I don't know if you guys have ever been over there, but Numbakula is a completely original Mist-like level, essentially, in Second Life that was made by Uru refugees and Mist players very early on. And what they did was they made completely original content in the style of Mist and Uru. And if you go to that island, if you're used to the sort of spatial and visual vocabulary of Mist games, you'll immediately recognize that you're in a Mist-inspired environment. So that was an early attempt that some players made at not just copying Uru, not just replicating ages, but actually trying to make something entirely new in the style, essentially an entirely new age. And people having done that now, and I think it's, for the mind of an Uru player, which is inherently a puzzle solver, right, creating an environment that's true to the canon of the Mist games is a really important creative challenge, and people would argue at length about this when I was studying the Uru community. People that created Uru content in Bear.com actually broke into two camps. One was making it look a lot like Uru, or very much like Uru, and another camp was making a hybrid aesthetic. So if you look at, say, Majandi and Talos' work, for instance, there was a hybrid aesthetic that was a little more cartoony and was designed to be Uru, but to fit into the cartoon aesthetic of there. Whereas you had people like Greeny, for instance, who made much more photorealistic objects that were not as much cartoony, but more trying to reflect what the actual aesthetic of Uru was. So the intellectual and creative challenge that entails is something that the Uru player inherently embraces as an intellectual proposition.
Yeah. And we're a pack of smart cookies. I'm sorry, but we're a pack of smart cookies, and I always
they've trained us well. They have trained us well.
Uru was created to train the faithful, and it is like getting lost at the world's coolest men's convention.
But the other thing I wanted to jump in, Sherry, if I can, there's an amazing amazing irony to all of this, in that, when I first wrote in the book about it, I was kind of amazed because I thought, here's a game that's about a group of people's world ending. They immigrate to another place. That's what Uru is about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
the journey from Gardening. Yes.
The irony of that world then closing, and those people who played that game having that same experience themselves. And so, in some way, I think that Uru actually trained players to have the refugee experience.
Mm-hmm. I'll definitely go that. I will definitely go that, because, you know what a canon junkie I am. I'm a canon junkie of the highest order. Mm-hmm. And,
Good
to
luck
me,
with that here.
to see the change, the journey of Anna going back to Cavern and then back out again after the fall. She was a great example of that survival instinct, I think, that is inherent in every player in Uru, because, those of us who have read the books and have really took time to immerse ourselves in the story of Uru. You are absolutely right, Doc. We are trained to be survivors. And that's why I always use that Frank Herbertism that Uru was created to train the faithful, because we do not give up. We do not lose hope. We keep being helpful. And no matter what gets thrown at us, we survive it. And we are a community of survivors. And no matter how many times our world may rise and fall, it's still Cavern Blood. That Cavern Blood, it runs so deep that I couldn't let go of my Cavern teachings for all the tea in China. I've written 3 papers in my World Lit class based on Uru and talking about Cavern values. And what was so funny to me, and I think this is reflective in, how David Wingrove kind of teamed up with Rand and Robin to write the books, is that they are a lesson in the 7 deadly sins. And I thought that was so neat, going into Dante's Inferno and all this other stuff. And I've just seen reflections in all of world literature of all these neat little pieces. The Ramayana of Valmiki, that is one of the best ones, is that, there's all these influences that are all combined inside our canon that inspire people to reach a higher state. And so, I mean, our survival instinct, I think, is only natural. But that's me.
I think that the Mist world and the Uru world are really comparable in that regard to things like Star Trek and Star Wars, where there's a world that's rich enough to almost, it's really comparable to any of the great mythologies, for instance. It has the same kind of robustness. And in addition, of course, the Mist games have the whole age writing component, which sort of then points us back again to the creativity element that I think ultimately Uruvians with any kind of passion for the content eventually want to be able to write their own ages.
Who doesn't?
You know what, Doc? All I want to do is find a builder for my literacy age. I want to see them come up with the spell stones. Where you trace the letter with your finger, it makes the sound. I want to see somebody pull that one off. I would just pay real money to see somebody.
That would be
pull
impressive.
Because my literacy age is just, it was a piece of fan fiction that everybody just went, we need that, because it was all letters, numbers, learning how to talk, just the little small things, because we love to learn. Have you noticed that, Doc, that the Uru community loves to learn?
It's because there's so much to learn.
Yeah, well, again, it goes back to the game, right? Because, like you said, the classic joke is that Mist was made for Mensa members, right? That it's really hard and intellectually challenging. And even now, there's Dunny language classes that were being taught in Bear.com, which are now moving over to Uru. People with for instance, the Dunny dictionary, people kind of learning various skills. The University of Bear, of course, where people were learning creation skills as well as other things. There was archaeology and Native American studies as well. But there is this passion for learning and this, I think, undaunted spirit that, things that are difficult are not going to stop you, essentially.
Yeah. And, at this juncture where everybody's trying to get a little bit negative, we've got griefers and such and so forth, I think I think this is a great reminder to everyone to make sure that, hey, you know what, this is who we are. And, you have to aspire to be greater, because that's what the Mist universe is about. But, so there's your reminder, community.
And actually,
get back to work.
Going back to the griefing issue, I think that one of the biggest causes of griefing in my research is boredom, right? So probably part of why we're seeing some griefing behavior now is precisely what you were saying earlier about people have done the ages, they've kind of run out of things to do. And I think that this could lead to, we could really see a new flowering of more emergent behavior, and of course the Dunny Olympics being a classic example of that, Sherry, where, you guys invented a whole new series of sports. I think that there are a lot more possibilities for those kinds of activities that don't require creation of original content. But I think we're going to see more things like the University of Bear in Uru, and we'll probably see, I remember playing hide and seek with you guys early on in Until Uru. So I think there are a lot more ways to play in Uru than people have even really barely touched on at this point. So I'm hoping, that the community, instead of annoying people, will, if you're bored, create something interesting for people to do.
Thank you, Doc. That's what I've been saying all along. But yeah, thanks for that big dose of guilt. I've got to get into Cavern and start cooking on my activities.
Get back to work.
There were some great things actually during the, remember there was the tapestry and you had the Ladies Garden Club and you guys had, maybe it's time for us to do another Dunny Games.
Yeah, I need to get on the stick with that. Hey, you Dunny Games people, post in the TCT forums. I need to hear from you. But anyway, but Doc, you are so amazing. I can't even thank you enough for coming on with us. But we need to go on to our next bullet point, which is Portal 2. The boys in Portal.
Boy.
We have this young man. His name is Dalkin, and Dalkin likes to sing along. He likes to sing along with the Portal lady, and he scares us a lot. But John, hook us up with Portal 2. What's going on?
Yeah, Dalkin actually is interesting because his little fun thing was he was trying to do the recipe.
Oh goodness!
Good luck getting all the ingredients.
Well,
the cake isn't a lie. It's actually there. It's
not really.
You don't want it.
Not really to cook the recipe. More so that he would keep reading it to us.
Oh.
I don't know. One of the balls that you put into the the hole at the end is
curiosity, the cake sphere, and then anger.
One of them gives you the recipe.
Insane ability to just about anything, and I can't even do it. It's like a whole 5 minutes worth of monologue just reciting this recipe. You can't do it.
So anyway, well, Portal 2, I kept thinking you kind of get a sense for Valve that they have a it's done when it's done kind of deal. We'll get that third episode of Half-Life 2 out someday when we're done with it.
I've been waiting for that since before the TF2 updates started coming out.
Yeah. So the fact that Portal 2 is already coming out seems like kind of a splash of cold water in your face.
Well, do you guys know the history of Portal? It's actually pretty interesting.
It is. It is fairly interesting. And I do like some of the details that have come out that are possible details from Portal 2.
I know that Portal was born somewhere of a developer that they absorbed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It was a group of students from DigiPen University in Redmond, Washington, and it was their senior project, and it was called Narbacular Drop. The premise was very similar to Portal, but pretty much the only difference with the portals themselves was that you could shoot portals through other portals. But apart from that, it was an extremely similar game, and Valve just kind of absorbed them when they saw this project and said, we can use this.
It was a Half-Life mod, though. I think that's the interesting part, is that they were already using the engine.
Old source engine, yeah.
Yep. I actually, in one of my other jobs is I co-direct an independent game festival, and we always keep an eye on these independent games, and especially student games. There's a number of student games and student teams that are starting to go into the mainstream gaming industry and win awards and whatnot. Portal, I think, won an award last year at the Game Developers Conference. It also is a team that the two lead designers on that team are both women, which is kind of unusual.
Wow.
Saying Portal won an award is like saying the water is wet. Of course it won an award.
But I mean, for something that started as a student game designed by two girls, it's kind of amazing how quickly it ascended.
It is. You never know what's going to be big.
And when people were buying the orange box just to play Portal, which is, an hour and a half long game, in the midst of all this other content.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it might be time for Mowog Thought. What do you think, John?
Yep. Over to you, Mowog.
Hello again. This is Mowog for the Cavern Today. Since we set up our own TCT neighborhood in the Cavern, I've been spending more time than usual getting to know it. Hanging around a hood with strangers is one thing, but having a special place where you can meet your friends is somehow different. Sort of like home, really. So that's why I was sitting in the light garden one day last week, just soaking up the atmosphere and listening to the water, that sort of thing. In my last report, you may recall that I mentioned I'd gotten a new key from Greason, as usual, and how great it was to have one again. Well, it turns out that key was kind of a mixed blessing, because this one simply didn't fit very well. So while I was there in the garden, I took it off to see if I could do anything with the buckle to make it fit more comfortably, and of course I fumbled and dropped it, and it bounced off my foot and into the water. Well, I wasn't concerned. I knew from previous experience that the keys are waterproof, so I took off my shoes and rolled up my pants legs and stepped into the water. As you know, the water isn't all that deep in the light garden. All the same, it's not easy to see to the bottom, so I found myself feeling around trying to locate my key. And to my great surprise, I found something else entirely. I found a key, all right, but a key of the KEY kind. It was of a rather unusual design. The handle, as well as the part that would fit in a lock, were 5-sided. And to my amazement, I realized that I'd found a Denis artifact, and it didn't take me long to begin wondering if it would actually fit a lock there in our neighborhood. I stuck it in my pocket and found my other key, of the KI kind, strapped it back on my hand, and left the garden. Now I realize I'm certainly not alone when it comes to wondering about all the locked doors in the hoods and the city. It was my curiosity about the Denis culture and people that were my main attraction to Uru in the first place, and many's the time I've tried a door someplace, only to find it securely locked. I suppose the DRC have had the same issues, as the doors have remained locked since the first day we were allowed to enter the cavern. So you can imagine the anticipation I felt, now that I had what was evidently a real Denis key. Perhaps I would finally be able to see what lay behind those doors and hazy windows. Think about it. Dwelling places, still lit by eternal fire marbles, but without the sound of footsteps for hundreds of years. What would I find? Would I need to report my discovery to the DRC? For that matter, do they still care? Well, whatever the case, my visit to the hood had suddenly taken on a new urgency. I tried the key in the first door I came across, and while it fit, I was unable to turn it. I wasn't really surprised, as there are plenty of doors in the hood, so I continued, but each time, while the key appeared to fit all the locks, it didn't seem to actually unlock anything. At the last door, when the key again failed to turn, I got a bit frustrated and, for some reason, shoved it into the lock even harder. Imagine my surprise when there was a muffled click from inside the door's ancient mechanism. Leave it to the Denis to be different, so the key didn't work by turning. All you had to do was to push it to disengage the lock. Well, as bad as I wanted to enter the room, curiosity got the better of me, and I backtracked to some of the other doors to see if the push-the-key trick would work with them as well. Unfortunately, it didn't, but at least I'd apparently unlocked one door, and it was time to explore. I returned to the door to find it still unlocked, and gently pushed it open. Dry hinges grated in protest, but the door swung easily enough, plowing an arc of dust as it moved across the floor. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light provided by the few remaining fire marbles and the dirty windows, I was gradually able to make out the features of the initial room. Now, we've all been to the cleft and have seen Anna's handiwork there. Each room's furnishings in the cleft were carved out of the living rock as needed. Well, in this Denis apartment, for so it evidently was, the same pattern was evident, but the room and its furnishings seemed somehow older to the point of being ancient, and there was a dignity to their design and function that seemed to echo the advanced society of the Denis race. I switched on my key light and followed its beam around the room. This had been a private home from the looks of it. There were still personal effects lying about, as if the owners had simply dropped everything and fled, and from what we understand of the plague unleashed by Viovis and Aguirres, my guess is that this is exactly what happened. The family who lived here appeared to have frantically gathered a few significant articles and disappeared. Drawers were hanging open, doors were ajar, and the door of a small wall safe was open slightly as well, its strange Denis lock, almost a puzzle of some sort, deciphered for one last time before the safe was rifled of its contents and abandoned. I made my way slowly to the kitchen. I knew the place was empty, but I still couldn't fail to sense a presence there. Perhaps I felt spirits of the Denis family who had once occupied these rooms, or a Barrow, maybe? Who knows, but I was on pins and needles the whole time. It was a very eerie experience. I did indeed find the kitchen. There were the remains of uneaten meals on the elegant tabletop, covered by a thick layer of dust. Beautiful goblets contained only a heavily concentrated layer of dried wine at the bottom, and there was a book lying open that, when dusted off, proved to be a collection of daily prayers to the Maker. The wash basin was equipped with running water, and I saw from the Denis writing on the valves that they had once dispensed hot and cold water. I tentatively turned a valve and watched as a sudden gush of filthy water slowly cleared until it flowed pure and sweet. And on a whim, I followed my key light down a nearby hallway and found what we all knew must surely exist, a restroom. I didn't take the time to investigate it, but suffice it to say that if word were to get out, it would be a very popular place indeed. Then I found sleeping quarters. The beds, set back into wall niches, were neatly made, and I was struck by the appearance of one of them. It was a much smaller bed than the others, and my suspicion that it must have been a child's bed were confirmed when I looked at it a bit more closely. At the foot of the pillow were 3 small stuffed animals. Not surprisingly, the creatures weren't bears, or any recognizable life form for that matter. They were quadrupeds, but very strangely proportioned, and I assumed that they must be patterned on some native life forms from the family's personal age, made by a mother to remind her son or daughter of the wonders of their own age while they were at home in the cavern. And yes, it brought home to me the savagery of the acts perpetrated by Viovis. Mothers and children were endangered, and many perhaps had died in the pestilence that he brought about. But enough on that. I made my way to another room that was unmistakably the family library. A great number of books were shelved in splendid bookcases, and I recognized some of the titles as biographies of kings and guild masters. There was a writing desk, too, and examining the artifacts there convinced me that I'd actually come across a few of the tools involved in the art. There were 3 blank books, very meticulously made, obviously to a time-honored formula. The bindings were elegant, with a blank area on the spine and cover where something, a new age title perhaps, could be added by the writer. I held one of the books in my hands and tried to comprehend the significance of the object. In these books lay the greatness of the Denis, a greatness now vanished with the exception of treasures such as these. There was another book also. This one lay open on the desk, with an elaborate pen, long dry, dropped alongside. The writing in the book, an elegant Denis script, appeared to stop directly in the middle of a page. I flipped to the front page of the book and found a dark linking panel. Apparently the writing had ceased before the age could be completed. Oh, to know what wonders would have been revealed had that writing been finished. Nobody would ever know the age that was being described in the pages of that book. And that's when I swung my light about and saw the pedestal standing in a niche in the corner of the room. Having read about the customs of the Denis, I had no doubt that I'd found the treasured link to the family's own private age. The head of this family must, then, have been a member of the Guild of Writers, and had personally penned this age for the exclusive use of his family. Yes, a closer look revealed that this was indeed a linking book. I couldn't make out the text on the cover, but it appeared to be a family name, followed by the Denis term for haven. Sadly, though, a glance at the first page revealed that the linking panel showed only the dark swirling of a dead link. Several possibilities entered my mind, but I feel strongly that this family, when they effected their panicked link to their personal age, must have taken that age's descriptive book with them, and then perhaps destroyed it upon their arrival, thus eliminating the possibility of any further links to their world. I prefer to think that's what happened, actually. I dread the thought that their age itself was destroyed, and I pray that they, or perhaps their descendants, may still be enjoying its wonders. And who knows, maybe even as I stood looking at their age book, they were even then remembering the great cavern they'd once called home, and wondering what had become of it. If I could, I'd tell them that the cavern, their old home, was very much alive, that a new generation of the once dreaded surface dwellers had been called to its depths, and were daily wondering at its greatness and learning more and more about the vanished race that had once dwelt there. I would tell them that we had also come to love their great cavern, and were making a home there. Your home, my home, our home. For the Cavern Today, this is Mowog signing off.
Thanks, Mowog, for that great thought. But I think I'm starting to hear some clatter out in the hood. Oh, guys, we better break this up. You never know what's going on out there.
Yeah.
The Dawkins loose. So let's wrap this up for the for TCT Talk. This has been Holly.
Hey, bye. Sorry.
Janathus.
See you later.
Jeff Wise.
Yeah, later, guys.
Mr. Wing.
Bye.
Me, Sherry. Bye, guys. See you next month. And, of course, our special guest. And thank you so much, Doc, for coming and being with us. This has meant so much to me. I just love you so much. So tell everybody bye, Doc.
Thank you so much for having me. Goodbye.
And we'll see you guys again next month. And what is that noise? That doing, doing, doing. Do you guys hear him?
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
No good. Tomfoolery, I say.
Oh, my word. Who gave Dawkins a pogo stick?
Such a mischievous act can only be the work of Janathus.
Well, you have to admit it keeps him occupied.
Occupied? Yes. But it also makes him about 10 times more obnoxious.
I'll bet you thought I couldn't stop bouncing. But I did.
Something tells me no good will come of this.
Hey, guys. Ooh, I almost forgot. Everyone, this is Moose, new staff member. Haze him properly, make me proud.
Hi, Moose.
Geez, Janathus, you could at least be sneaky. The pranks work less when announced beforehand.
Hey, new person over here, too.
Oh yeah, Wing's new too.
Hi, Wing.
Okay, we are corny, but yet we're such a well-coordinated bunch.
Yeah, I'll say.
It's nice to meet you all, but what I was going to say was,
I warned you. Maybe that will teach you to stay out of here.
Yeah, Jeff has set up cones, tripwire, and a linking book in the auditorium to safeguard his keyboard.
Jeff, could you come down here for a minute?
He'll be in a minute. Safely navigating the auditorium looks like it's slow going.
Hey, I left Eddie in there. Does that mean we can't have Eddie back?
I think he kicked Eddie out.
Oh, rats. Took me forever to kick him up there in the first place.
Yes? You rang?
Now, Jeff, I thought we agreed that the auditorium was not an exclusive space and that we would share it.
No, I think you agreed to put your speakers at my disposal and that you would keep your HD equipment out of my way.
Jeff, darling, we all love you, but we can't work with two dictators. We spend enough time trying to keep Janathus reeled in. How about you just take the high road and,
You don't understand. Tolkien is tireless. I keep waking up to the abominable heart and soul. It's in my nightmares. He must be defeated.
I'm back. I'll bet you thought you were getting rid of me, but you didn't.
Dalkin, honey, we need to talk. Oh, my. Oh. He brought a Keanu lint from chemo into the hood.
You, indeed.
Dalkin, we talked about this. We give you your daily chocolate orange and you behave.
Wait a minute. If I don't behave, I get candy?
No, you don't get candy. Be quiet.
Oh? And what are you going to do about it?
Sometimes I wonder if maybe it wasn't such a bad idea to bring a video game system down here.
Oh, it's a rare time when we're still in the hood after a cast is completed. I guess we just all have to blow off some steam.
I, for one, am going to step out before... Ow! I'm unarmed. That means you can't shoot me.
Just another casualty of war, Tom.
Let me reload and show you what I can and can't do.
Why, you little...
Charlie ho!
Well, if you can't beat him, join him.
Okay, before I get beamed by one of these random Nerf darts raining everywhere, I'm linking out. Hey, Janathus, hey, don't you even think it. Heck this, I'm out of here.
Is there any sanity left in the cavern today?
Well, let me check.
Ow! You got me in the nose with that Nerf ball.
Nope, I don't think so.
Look out! Time for darts and machine gun forge.
Whoa! I almost got it that time.
Take that, Jedi!
You're gonna hit the broadside of a barn. Look out! Sorry.
No!
Headshot. I'm not.
Take that, Jedi!